starting and when I'm not. No, maybe I was already. I don't know. Anyway, welcome to another Curmudgeon in the Cellar. A couple of things to talk about tonight. Partially in answer to a couple of questions and partially in response to some silly stuff I see online. Thank God for Facebook. It keeps me so amused. Well, all right. We'll start with, I had an interesting question. I copied it out. I'm going to read it here for you. Question. During your time at Dragon or earlier, even pre-technical studies rules, were there any industry periodicals which you regarded as well done? Were there any other columns or features which you have liked to have published in Dragon? Finally, which columns or features in Dragon were you notably pleased at printing, irrespective of their overall popularity with readers and or staff management? There's some good stuff here. Let's see, where do we start? Okay, there were a couple of magazines that I looked at, obviously, before Little Wars and Dragon. Fire and Movement, that was a Roger McGowan magazine, and started by Roger. I always liked it, admired it. He had great production values, wonderful layouts, and interesting material as well. There was another one out of the Midwest that wasn't nearly as well produced, but it was regular and it was frequent, and that was Wargamers Digest by Gene McCoy. Gene was ex-military, and he got a lot of ex-military guys to write interesting articles. You never knew what they were going to be writing about. More often than not, it was modern or recent history. But every once in a while, he'd get somebody to write a piece for him. Famously, if you got a piece published, I think you got $25. And I believe Gary had a piece published by Gene at one time or another, probably about something ancient, trying to leaven the mix of the magazine. Of course, I read Strategy and Tactics. Everybody that was a wargamer read Strategy and Tactics then, because every other month there was another board game in the magazine. And then probably also got into Moves. If you'd been doing S&T for a while, you got into Moves. Moves was a house organ that talked about the games and how to play the games better and alternate scenarios and different what-if things. Then there was the General. That was Avalon Hill's house organ. They talked about their games. And really, up till 70, 75, when I went to work there, that was about it. We really broke new ground. We had a little shovel breaking ground with Strategic Review. And we started, writing about stuff that wasn't just our stuff. And then when we launched the Dragon, it was for the purpose of writing about all kinds of gaming, not just ours. That had been our talk long before we actually launched it. That's what Gary and I had planned all along. I ran a lot of fiction early on that the fans did not like at first, and I didn't care. I know that sounds kind of shitty, but keep in mind that this is when we were trying to help people gather stuff they could weave together. We were throwing things at the wall to see what would stick, because this is pre any scenarios or modules, as they came to be called. That's partially what led to the Judges Guild, the Gazetteer. Now, that was a publication that I admired greatly. Its production value stunk, but that wasn't the point. It was DMs sharing stuff with other DMs. The Guild magazine, Gazetteer, I don't remember the name of it. Gazetteer might have been something that Jaquays did. I'm not sure. Might have been for them. they did some interesting stuff. What I did in the Dragon, some of the people didn't think I should waste space on cartoons. Of course, Phineas and Wormy showed the foolishness of that idea. But I ran a lot of fiction, and people didn't like me wasting time and space in the fiction. And I ran 2 pieces that were pretty awful. That was Gary's thing, where he was writing as somebody Ernst or whatever. And it wasn't real good. He got much better, and I was a better editor later on. But the thing that's hard, I guess, for people to understand is that I had no restrictions from management whatsoever. The only one technically overseeing me in my operation was Gary, because he was legally the publisher. Okay, you have to have a publisher, and so the publisher was basically the guy that says, "Okay, you want to stick needles, stick them in me. I'm responsible for what I have people doing publishing." But he was an absolutely hands-off publisher. A couple of times I had I'll give you when we were first working in the basement, and still working in the basement and getting ready to do better, bigger things, and everything. And now it's time to start gearing up for the magazine. I asked Brian and Gary one morning, when would they like to schedule editorial meetings? And Brian looked like I just slipped him something nasty tasting in his coffee. And Gary was like, "We don't need editorial meetings. You're the editor, edit." And I said, "Well, you're the publisher." He goes, "Yeah, edit. So that's why you're here, Tim. Go for it." And so that's what I did. I edited. I think on 2 occasions, I might have taken something in and said, "Well, I'm thinking about running this, and it's a little weird. It's a little weird, or it's a little a new direction for the game." The game being D&D, of course. He never cared what other games I ran articles about ever. He didn't care. That was my bailiwick. That was my judgment. So I never really had anybody didn't like it. Everything I did run, probably at one time or another, had some resistance. I know when I started running the Fantasy Smith, there were relatively few people that were into converting miniatures back then. They were the serious guys that didn't want their whole unit all being looking like they were all bear-skinned guards in front of Buckingham Palace, in one rigid pose. But that proved to be very popular. Comics would first, why am I wasting that space? Well, if I was going to use that space that I use for comics for anything else, I would have sold advertising. I certainly wouldn't have run more articles, because that would have eaten up more material. And in the early days, I had to make sure that I had enough stuff on hand for 2-3 issues, down the road. What could I add to it? What did I need to fill it out, etc. So I never really had any, I never heard any flack from anybody about anything that we ran. The fact that I was so wildly independent, it probably sat like a burr under the saddle blanket of the Blooms, because they basically, as long as I wasn't losing money, all they could do was audit my books, and that was it. I mean, I wrote all the checks out of my department, out of my division periodicals, and so I really didn't get any. I really didn't get any static for anything that I did. Were there other things I would have liked to have had? Well, I would have liked to have had some of the Fire and Movement production values that he had, some of the artists that he had. There were other magazines after us. Space Gamer was a very interesting one. They took off and focused on sci-fi, and they were also a publisher of some interesting games in the sci-fi field. So that was kind of a natural. But they did do other stuff, not just their own, mostly, but not all. There were interesting fanzines, they were called at the time. There were some interesting ideas being bandied about, and there were some real scary ones being bandied about that we didn't want to see become any more prevalent. There was weird stuff of girdles of sex change and girdles of sex orientation. Not only could you get turned into the other sex, but then you could be turned gay. And this was at a time when it was a much more touchy subject, and we really didn't want to see him going there. But on the other hand, some of the I'm sure that there were probably a half dozen people that published in my magazines that I first saw in a fanzine, and liked the way they thought or liked their approach to something. So I did look at those. We looked at them as a company, kind of seeing what's going on. There was zines from the East and zines from the West Coasts. So we found stuff there. I found stuff there, and I, for the company, watched for stuff that might, start infringing and getting weird and associated with us that we didn't want associated with us because it was weird. It's a delicate dance back then, trying to not seem like we were really, really controlling, but trying to guide the game past some of the rocks that it might have smashed on going down that stream as the current picked up. And wow, that was a pretty good ad hoc. All right, let's see what else we got here. All right. Oh, well, okay. I've been watching some weird stuff on Facebook. And the conversation is forked off in a couple of different threads, and it's gotten kind of nasty or snarky anyway in one or two places. And it has to do with, well, the first thing, apparently it's all a misunderstanding. Somebody talked to somebody. Somebody that was talked to said, oh, well, gee, I wonder how I could get myself invited as a guest to such and such a convention. And it wasn't the person, it was hearsay. Okay, it was secondhand. And immediately people jumped up and down on it about, well, who is this dude, etc. And he doesn't have an immediately recognizable name to the fans and the what's that Italian word? Cosignente, the people that are in the know, that love Gary Kahn and kind of feel protective about it. And so from that point, it got snarky about, well, the good dude's never attended on his own dime. He'll only go if he's a guest. Well, what's he done? And you'll figure this out if you really give a damn. He's done an incredible. He funded a very, very big Kickstarter, and so some people seem to think that gives him cred right there. Well, if you watch too many of these, you know what I think about Kickstarter. Kickstarter, wildly successful Kickstarter funding just means you did a really ace job of selling the product and a dandy video. A really great Kickstarter is one that delivers and everybody's happy. Now, lately, the last couple of years, timing has been a problem. Not on the parts of some of the companies that I'm familiar with their operations, but trying to get things in and out of the country from China. However, still, my premise remains that how well do you deliver? I don't hold late against companies. Too many good companies are being held hostage. The top secret games were held up. Goodman's Mutant Crawls have been held up, and it's not their fault. I know from personal knowledge when they sent all their stuff off and everything, and the delays have been on the far end where who's going to go to China and holler at a bunch of people that don't know what you're hollering about anyway. So anyway, it got worse from there, and then something came up about who gets invited to this con or who gets invited to cons, and now we have some kind of gatekeepers, and this is all going on about Gary Con. All right, I'm not going to hide anymore. It's a con that's extremely special to me. I have no financial stake in it. My stake in it is my promise to the family right when Gary passed that I would support this celebration of his life as long as I'm physically able, because he was my great friend too. So that's my involvement, is I want to see this con continue in memory and celebration of the life of my good friend Gary. All right, now go back. Right now, Gary Con, and this is Tim speaking. I'm not a director of the convention. I've not spoken about, well, in generalities, I have spoken about some of what I'm going to talk about now with some of the people that make the big decisions, and they're aware of a lot of what what I feel about what I'm maybe about to say. I got to dance carefully here before I get pilloried. At some point, the facilities available in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin will reach a maximum capacity. It is my opinion, and I know that there are others who share this opinion to one degree or another, that it would not be a good move to take Gary Con away from Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, where it all began. Right? That means that someday they may have to limit tickets. Well, then people started back to the other argument about this individual, and should he come and should he not come, and who comes and who gets to decide, and what's the criteria. Well, I'm not sure exactly what the criteria is for Gary Con, because again, I'm not involved in that. Of course, yes, I am a guest. There's no secret about that. I have been a guest each year, and I hope to be a guest, until I do something really stupid or really senile, for many years to come. At some point, they're going to have to limit the number of tickets. And how they're going to do that, I don't know. They may, up the prices and let attrition take care of it. They may decide, okay, the first 2,500 that register, sign in, and pay their money get the first 2,500 tickets. I don't know. Again, I'm not part of that decision-making team. Whether or not I may get consulted at some point in the future, I have input, but just as in a consulting, another voice from out here, this is my opinion, period. So, okay, now people go, well, that makes it pretty elitist. Well, okay, there's other cons that are much more elitist, if that's your criteria. One of the conventions I have great fun going to every year is North Texas RPG Con in Dallas in June. Love it. There's probably only 600-700 people that attend. They don't care if it gets any bigger. There's probably 40 or 50 people from the industry that are guests there of one degree or another. It's like we could have our own little salon of gamers if we so choose, right? And that's kind of what makes that one fun, is because there are so many people from the industry, and we do make ourselves extremely accessible. I mean, criminy, some of us just sit at tables out in the main hall, hi, saying hi to people walking by, talking to each other. People stop by to talk to us. You know, it's very elitist if you look at it that way. All right. Gary Kahn's choice of who's a guest, who's a featured guest, whose games get special status, that's based on commercial terms. Some of us have names that people are eager to meet or eager to play in our game because of our reputations for being brutal killers or good storytellers or both or neither, whatever. And so that is elitist, yeah. Their criteria is looking for who's got a name that they can tack on a game that'll then be a platinum game and generate the most return. And that's what it is. I mean, all the altruism in the world isn't worth a shit if you can't make your convention self-sufficient. If you want it to be big. If you choose to keep it small, you can foot the bill yourself if that's what floats your boat. The people in Kansas City a few years back had a benefactor that was putting in a lot of money to help keep this floating. And they didn't have a single clue as to how to organize it and who to give breaks on the attendance. And they imploded after 2 years, which is sad because I really enjoyed going out there and meeting those people, playing with them. And the organizers just didn't have a clue as to how to make a con self-sufficient. So Gary Kahn has to be self-sufficient. Gary Kahn can only grow to a certain size and still be able to accommodate people. So who makes them a guest? Well, the people that do Gary Kahn, because they're looking at who's going to make them the most commercial success. There are people now that are guests at Gary Kahn that I've never met, that are parts of the industry that I have no contact with, but they have fans and people come to see them, and people come to play in their games, and you know that's fine. I'm not the one who decides who's worthy and who isn't. The only claim I can make is to being the senior member of the TSR Old Guard, a position I do not intend to relinquish anytime soon. Okay, so that's, you know, who's a gatekeeper? I don't know. The gatekeepers are what the convention organizers think are going to draw people there to make their convention successful. Whether that means having Comp and Bill Webb and Matt Finch for Frog God, because they run great games. People they sign up to play in their marathon games. They run games for like 25 people in the room for hours and hours. And that's what people come for. And so, that's a sound decision, whether it's Gamehole making that decision or it's Nortex and NTRPG Con making that decision. They're looking at what's going to fill their tables. They're looking at whose games are likely to fill up and whose games are going to draw. Not just fill, but draw. Every year, every con I go to, I get somebody at least at one table. Man, I wanted to sit down and play with you for a couple of years and finally get into your game. I find, that's so gratifying and so heartwarming and so I'm so grateful when for those sentiments. But then I'm always worried, well, golly, I hope I live up to these expectations. The cons are getting like that now too. Gary Kahn has an expectation. Nortex has an expectation. What can I say about Total Confusion out east? They're so well established, 32 years now, that you know what you're going to get there. Gary Kahn's working hard at it, 10 years now. Gamehole's got, I think this will be their fourth, and they're very well organized. There's other cons that I don't go to. I can't go to all of them. I wish I'd have to win the big soupity duper $500 million lottery ticket tomorrow to be able to afford to do that. And then I just buy a big caravan and hire somebody to drive me around. Be like Willie Nelson. Boy, would that be a life. Let's see what else. I'm working on a project. I'm really excited about this, with a museum out in Southern California, the George S. Patton Memorial Museum in Chiriaco Point, California. Go check them out when you get a chance. They got a website. It's in work, but it's getting better. And these are the people that I donated my armor collection to a couple of years ago, because they're going to build these neat dioramas in this new wing of the museum that they have. And I've been talking to people to work with them and talking to them. They got a new director. It's real exciting times. Every history teacher dreams of someday having his name on a little brass plaque over a doorway in a museum somewhere, saying that he had something to do with what was going on. So I'm real excited about that. Let's see, what else? There hasn't been a lot of real stupidity online lately. The elitist thing was funny. Gatekeepers, that was just a new thing that came up, a new bad word. Who's a gatekeeper? Hell, I don't know. I'm a gatekeeper. I decide what I'm going to talk about and what I won't talk about. Guess that makes me a gatekeeper. One last thing. I really meant it when I said, please, if you go to a con, any kind of con that has our kind of folks, whether it's Comic-Con, Gaming Con, Convention of the Con, right? And they have a policy for what's acceptable behavior. I really want to collect those. I've only got a couple so far. This is a project of mine. I want to put together a policy that makes everybody coming to our conventions feel safe and included, and having recourse if those feelings should fail them. I had somebody point out a very good point that with Gen Con gets so big, that some of the residents of Indy know that the costume parade is on Saturday, and then part of it's outside. And so a lot of ne'er-do-wells have taken the last couple of years coming down for that. And yes, some of them have made a few lewd remarks. However, there's still more lewd remarks inside the building. I'm sorry I keep doing this. It's not a secret signal to anybody. I've had allergies and now they're drying up. So, it's either wet or dry. There's no winning one way or the other. And, again, on the policies, if I achieve nothing else before I have to hang up my dice, I'd like to see us shed our image of being large, oversized, smelly guys wearing dark t-shirts. Now, we were already working on the guys thing because we got lots and lots and lots of ladies playing with us now. Females, girls, whatever the term I'm supposed to use. The other set of chromosomes than mine. There's no reason we can't do this. Gary Kahn was the best ever, as far in what I was able to detect with my nose, but zipping around on my scooter. Gary Kahn was the best ever. I'd like to think it was me poking at people and reminding them this is soap, this is deodorant, this is what you do with it. But come on, We're smart people. We're very smart people. Let's get rid of this image. Let's, I'm not saying dress up, but house slippers and jammy bottoms, male or female, is just not, that's too relaxed. That's after 6 o'clock. That's after 7 o'clock when you're playing games in the room, or you're down in the open gaming table, after the dealer rooms are closed. That's fine. But 11 o'clock in the morning, I'm not advocating a dress code. I'm just saying let's work on cleaning up our image this year. And then maybe people wouldn't automatically think there's something wrong with us or weird. Now, we know we're weird, but we don't have to let them know. And on that, I'll say goodnight.